Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just make sure everything is working over here. Okay, looks like we're live. We're good to go. Make sure I can hear myself. There I am. Okay. All right. We're going to be going over some SAT prep today. Got just a couple more weeks of this, of doing the SAT prep. There we go. Let me get my whiteboard up here. Yeah, this is the second week of the SAT and PSAT prep that we're gonna be going through. And I've got 2 more weeks of this, and then, we'll get back to I'm gonna take a little break for spring break in mid-March, and then we'll get back to other pre-algebra and algebra topics, just to close out the rest of the school year. If you don't know me, my name is Beth from my tutoring bee. I've been doing these live streams every week now on Thursdays for Mountain. Um, and I'm seeing how it goes for these next few weeks, and then I'll decide if I will continue it through the end of the school year. But yeah, if you're here, say hi. Would love to um, see you in the chat. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started with our PSAT. All of the work that we're gonna be going through is here at satsuite.collegeboard.org, and you can go to practice. There is a direct link in the description, so you can click on that. Sure to be a lot easier than typing all of this in. Starting with the PSAT, we're doing the 8 and 9 test. This is bundle 1, and we're doing module 2. So if you're wanting to go through these problems with me, on your own paper or whatever, then that's how you can find everything that we're working on today. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. And I'm just picking up where I left off from last week. Last week, we covered the first 2 pages of this PSAT, module 1, bundle 1, module 2, and so now we're starting on the 3rd page of that. So number 10, we've got, the graph shown models the number of candy bars a certain machine wraps with a label in X seconds. Okay, so we can see on our graph here that our y-axis is the number of candy bars wrapped, and the x-axis is our time. So according to the graph, what is the estimated number of candy bars the machine wraps with a label per second? So when we see those words per second, then we are basically looking for the rate of change, or another word for that is just the slope. We wanna know what the slope of this line. How fast are these candy bars getting wrapped each second? So we do have to be a little bit careful with this graph because they are counting by 2s along the x-axis, and then it looks like by 20s is what's numbered, and then we do have some lines in between, so it's by 10s. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at this point of 280, and then, of course, our starting point is 0, 0, and let's take a look at the slope. So our rise is 80, and our run is 2, right? So our slope, m equals 80 over 2, and I do feel like that's one of the reasons why they have 80 as one of the choices, because you might see that that's the first point and it lines up with 80. But that is not actually the slope for this one. We do need to simplify this. So that simplifies down to 40. So 40 is the actual slope of this one. All right, so let's go ahead and go down to number 11. In a right triangle, the measure of one of the acute angles is 51 degrees. What is the measure in degrees of the other acute angle? All right, well, let's draw out a right triangle here. So here's our right triangle, put our right angle right there. And they're telling us that one of the angles is 51 degrees, and we need to figure out this other third angle. So the triangle angle sum theorem tells us that all three angles in a triangle add up to 180. So what we could do is add up these two angles, 51 and 90, and then subtract that from 180 to figure out this third angle. That will definitely work. However, there is a little bit of a shortcut that we can take with right triangles. Because half of 180 is 90 degrees, that means half of that total 180 degrees in a triangle is being taken up just by this angle alone. So the other two angles will equal 90 together. They are complementary. So we can make this a little bit easier, not have to do so much addition and then subtraction. We can just do 90 minus 51, which gives us 39. And there we go. We've got 39 degrees right there. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to drop those in the comments as well. I'm trying to keep an eye on the comments over here. That's why I keep looking over here on the side. All right, let's take a look at 12. What is the mean of the data shown? So mean, median, range, mode, those are all of the central tendencies that we learn about when we're doing, like, pre-algebra, and one way that I remember what mean is, like, how do we find mean, is I tell my students it's the meanest one because it takes the most work. It requires us to do the most work. So this is the one where we have to add all of our data points and then divide by the numbers that we have. So let's go ahead and add. I'm gonna go ahead and just calculate this on my calculator, but I will write it out here just so that we know what we're doing. So we're gonna add all of this up, and then we're going to divide by 5. That's how many data points we have. So we've got 2 plus 9 plus 14 plus 23 plus 32. That gives us 80, and 80 divided by 5 gives us 16. So our mean is 16. All right, we're moving right along on this section. Number 13, the function f is defined by f of x equals 6 plus the square root of x. What is the value of f of 36? If you watched my last live stream, live or on the replay, we went over how what this means when there's a number inside the set of parentheses, and also like what f of x actually means. Remember, this is just another way of writing y. It's the function of x. So usually we have an equation where y equals something with an x, and we substitute different numbers in for x. We can put different numbers in, and y will change depending on what x is. So this is no different. We have a function of x. So whatever we substitute in for x, that's what f of x is going to equal. And they're telling us right here by putting this 36 inside that set of parentheses that that is what x equals, or that's what they want us to find the function of 36. So we're going to do that. So f of 36 equals 6 plus, and then instead of the x, we're writing in 36. Okay, 36 is a perfect square. So the function of 36 equals 6 plus, and then the square root of 36 is 6. And then f of 36, we're just going to complete this, is 12. So that is the function of 36 for this one. Excuse me. What have we got here? We've got, it looks like a system of equations. The solution to this given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x? Okay, so they're just wanting the x portion of this solution. So normally a solution to a system is both the XY coordinates, so we would have to find two numbers, but in this one, we're just wanting to find X. You might be tempted, just looking at this one, you might be tempted to solve for y in this second equation by dividing by 3 and get y equals 11 over 3, which would still work. However, I'm also seeing 3y, the term 3y in this other equation. So we really don't even have to do all of that extra work. If 3y equals 11, then 3y equals 11 in this equation too. And then that gets rid of the y term and just has an x in that equation, which we can then solve. So now all we have to do is write x plus 11 equals 29 and then solve for x. So that's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and subtract 11 from both sides of the equation. So x equals, looks like 18. So that is our value of x. So this would be the x portion of our coordinate. If we needed to find the whole solution, we would then take that 18 and plug it back in into one of these equations and solve for y. Well, not one of the, it would only be the top equation that we could use because this one doesn't have an x at all. But this top equation, we would substitute in this x for 18 and then solve for y. But we don't really have to do that. They're just asking for the value of x. All right, great. Well, let's move on to our next page. There we go. Okay. I don't think I meant for that other page to be stuck in there. All right. So again, module 2, this is the PSAT 8-9 bundle. Bundle 1 and module 2. On a car trip, Rhett and Jessica each drove for part of the trip, and the total distance they drove was under 220 miles. I'm just going to underline that part. Rhett drove at an average speed of 35 miles per hour, and Jessica drove at an average speed of 40 miles per hour. Which of the following inequalities represents a situation where R is the number of hours Rhett drove and J is the number of hours Jessica drove? Okay, that makes sense. So let's see. So since Rhett drove 35 miles per hour, I'm looking for 35R in one of my equations. And I only see that in these first two. So automatically C and D are out because they've got 40R. And then that corresponds with what Jessica drove. Jessica drove 40 miles per hour, so we should be multiplying her number of hours times 40. So then the only other part that's different about these is the inequality symbols. So it says that the total distance that they drove, which is what this part of the inequality would represent, is the total distance, was under 220 miles. So that's going to be selection B because that is only one where the distance is less than 220. All right, let's go to 16. All right, we've got an equation here, B equals 42CF. The given equation relates the positive numbers B, C, and F. Which equation correctly expresses C in terms of B and F? Okay, this is what we call a literal equation. And a lot of times when there's just one variable in an equation, students can solve these really complex equations. But then when we throw multiple variables in and you have to solve for one of the variables in terms of the other variables, it seems really confusing. But we're just following the rules of algebra. So we want C by itself on one side of the equation. Let me go ahead and rewrite this down here. We want C on one side of the equation by itself. And in terms of B and F, so that means B and F are going to be over here on this side of the equation. So we just want C by itself on one side. So what operations are happening to C over here on this right-hand side? Well, it's being multiplied times 42 and it's being multiplied times F. So in order to undo the operation, we're going to divide. And we can just go ahead and divide by both 42 and F at the same time. So then that cancels out with that. F cancels out with F, so we are just left with C on one side, and then over here, it might look messy or it might look like this is not a solution, but that's as far as we can go because we don't know what these other, variables are, so that's as far as we can go with that one. So it looks like A is our choice right there. Okay, great. Alright, just checking in over here. Alright, we've got number 17. Savio bought some potatoes and celery. The potatoes cost 69 cents per pound, and the celery cost 99 cents per pound. If Davio spent $5.34 in total and bought twice as many potatoes sorry, bought twice as many pounds of celery as pounds of potatoes, how many pounds of celery did Davio buy? Sounds like this is a system of equations. So we know that the celery cost 69 cents. And I'm sorry, nope, that is incorrect. The potatoes cost 69 cents and the celery cost 99 cents. Just a different little squiggle line there just so that I remember that those 2 go together. And then we also know that this is the total that he spent. So let's write that equation first. So we know that it's going to be 0.69 p. I'm going to use p for potatoes plus 0.99 c, c for celery, is going to equal $5.34, right? So P is going to represent the pounds of potatoes and C is going to represent the pounds of celery. And so then for each of those weights, we would multiply times their respective cost. And we know that the total is 534. The other thing that they told us is that he bought twice as many pounds of celery as pounds of potatoes. So a lot of times this part gets confusing of how to write this equation for students. Students know that it's either 2p equals c or p equals 2c. So I encourage students to write both of these options out and then make up some numbers and plug them in and see which one works that matches what we've got here. So it's telling us twice as many pounds of celery as pounds of potatoes. So we're expecting more celery, right? So let's say that he bought, I don't know, this is not the right answer, but let's just say that he bought 5 pounds of potatoes, then that means that he would have to buy 10 pounds of celery, right? Because it says twice as many pounds of celery as pounds of potatoes. So which one of these equations does that work for? So if he bought 5 pounds of 5 pounds of potatoes, then what does that mean for celery? Would that give us what we're looking for? Sorry, hang on just a second. Gotta fix something here. Okay. So, yes, this would work because if he bought 5 pounds of potatoes here, and multiply that times 2, that would give us 10 pounds of celery. If we entered that in here, if we said, "Okay, well, if he bought 5 pounds of potatoes, and then 10 pounds of celery," well, 2 times 10 does not equal 5. So we're looking at this equation up here, 2p equals c. All right, now we've got 2 equations, now we can solve it. So, I think this is a case for substitution because we have an equation where c equals 2p, so we can substitute in that 2p for the c in this first equation. So let's go ahead and solve that. The question did ask us for how many pounds of celery, so I could have solved this second equation for p and substitute it in into here, and then that would automatically give me the pounds of celery, but I think it'll be pretty easy to figure out, after we figure out the potatoes, then we can figure out the celery. I think that would be easy. Okay. Alright, so I've just rewritten this first equation, but I've replaced C for celery with the 2p that it equals, and then let's go ahead and solve. So we've got 0.69p plus what's 0.99 times 2? 4.98 p equals 5.34. Right, and then we're going to add in that, 69. So we've got 2.67 p equals 5.34. And we're gonna divide by 2.67, and p equals 2. Alright, so that means that he bought 2 pounds of celery, and again, we see the answer there, so that's why they put that there, but I I think I keep saying mixing up potatoes and celery, I'm sorry. He bought 2 pounds of potatoes, which is why this answer is right here, because 'cause they're trying to trick us, but the question asked for how much celery did he buy. We know from this equation that he bought 2 times whatever it was for potatoes, so 2 times 2 is 4, so we're looking at answer D for that one. Alright, and then we're gonna go on to okay. In the given scatter plot, a line of best fit for the data is shown. Which of the following is closest to the slope of this line of best fit? So we have a line of best fit here. We can look for what I call pretty points, just points that go through the graph perfectly. Honestly, I don't see any except for maybe this one. So we're going to have to look at, I don't know, something close. This one looks close. Honestly, looking at our answer choices, this might be a case of just process of elimination. This graph is going down as we go to the right. So that tells us that we have a negative slope right off the bat. So that means A and B are out. Those cannot be one of the answer choices. Each of these X points and Y points are counting by 1. We don't have a very steep slope. -7 would be a really steep slope. So we think of that as -7/1. That means we would have to go down 7 units and then to the right 1. So let's say that we have a point up here at 0, 10. We would have to go down 7 units and then over to the right 1. That's a slope of -7, very steep. This one does not look that steep. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that it's negative point 0.7. Well, let's go ahead and do some calculations here and see if that matches up with what we picked out as the closest points that we could along this line. So our rise is 2, our run is 3, and so 2 over 3, a negative 2 over 3, if we were to calculate that, that is a negative zero point 0.6 repeating, which is going to be closest to negative zero point 0.7. So that's our slope for that one. I believe that's it for that one. Okay, great. All right, we're gonna go to SAT practice in just a second, and for the SAT, we're using bundle 4. Again, the link is in the description, but this is where you can find, um, these pages on the College Board website. Give me just a second, let me get set up over here. Again, we're starting on page 3 because we did the first 2 pages last week. Okay. All right, let's get into problem 10 here. To estimate the proportion of a population that has a certain characteristic, a random sample was selected from the population. Based on the sample, it is estimated that the proportion of the population that has the characteristic is 0.49, with an associated margin of error of 0.04. Okay, I'm just going to underline both of those. Based on this estimate and margin of error, which of the following is the most appropriate conclusion about the proportion of the population that has the characteristic? Okay, so what all of this means, this is a lot of information. What all of this means is that the estimated, we'll say average, is 0.49. But a margin of error means that it could be this much less and it could be this much more. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take 0.49 and we're going to subtract 0.04. And then we're also going to add 0.04. And then that's going to be sort of our window of possibilities that somebody would have this characteristic. So let's just subtract. We've got 5, 4, so we've got 0.45 as the low end, and then 3, 5, so we've got 0.53 as our high end. So let's take a look at our answer choices. It is possible that the proportion is between 0.45 and 0.53. Those are the two numbers that we got. It is plausible that the proportion is less than 0.45. If they had asked the question in a slightly different way and said, less than, um, or lower than the people who have this characteristic, then that would be it. The proportion is exactly 0.49. We know that there is a margin of error, and it is possible that the proportion is greater than 3. So, we know that A is gonna be the choice for that one. Alright, let's go down to number 11. A moving truck can tow a trailer if the combined weight of the trailer and the boxes it contains is no more than 4,600 pounds. What is the maximum number of boxes this truck can tow in a trailer with a weight of 500 pounds if each box weighs 120 pounds? Okay, so we've got the truck that weighs 500 pounds. And then we're going to pack in boxes inside that truck, right? So here's the truck, and we're gonna pack in boxes inside of here. And each of these boxes weighs 120, right? But all of this, the total weight, because we have to consider some of the weight of the truck itself plus the boxes, so it can be no more than 4,600 pounds. So that means all of this weight has to be less than or equal to 4,600. So let's take a look at what that looks like for an equation. So we've got the 500, that's what the truck weighs, plus 120x, right? X will represent the number of boxes that we have. We would multiply that number times 120, and all of that has to be less than or equal to 4,600. All right, so we subtract 500 from both sides. 120x is less than or equal to 4,100. Let's see what that is. I feel like it's gonna go in evenly. We're gonna divide by 120. And so then we get x is less than or equal to, I've got 34.16 repeating. Now, obviously, we're not going to have a decimal of a box. We're gonna have whole numbers for boxes. So then the question is, what is the maximum number of boxes? So if we went to 35 boxes, um, then that would be too much, right? X has to be less than or equal to 34.16. So we can't go higher. We can even think of it on a number line, right? So if this is 34.16 repeating, This is 35. This is 34. This x has to be equal to, so close circle, or lower than. So 34 is so that's the most that this truck can hold. All right, let's go into problem 12. What is the positive solution to the given equation? All right, so we've got another quadratic here. So negative 4x squared minus x equals negative 36. And we want all of our terms over on one side of the equal sign in order to solve the quadratic. We're going to be factoring this. You could take all of, since we do have a multiple choice, you could substitute all of these numbers in for x and see which one results in a true equation. So that's definitely an option for you. I'm going to go ahead and factor this. So we're going to go negative 4x squared minus 7x. I'm adding 36 to both sides so that we have it all equal to 0. Now I also want to get rid of this negative. I don't like having a negative out for my first term. So I'm going to divide everything by -1. So that's just going to flip the signs of all of my terms. And 0 divided by -1 is still just 0. So, and yes, you can do that as long as you're doing whatever operation you're performing to both sides of the equation, then you can do it that way. All right, so now let's factor. I can't factor any greatest common factor out of these 3 terms. So I've got a few options. For 4x squared, I can either separate it. I'm going to do like a T chart over here. It's either going to be 1x times 4x or it's going to be 2x times 2x. And then for 36, negative 30, I know it's negative. I'm just going to figure out the factor for 36. I've got 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12. I'm just listing factors. 4 and 9, let's see, 5, and then 6 and 6. Okay, so I've got all of my factors for 4 and 36, and I typically tend to use the guess and check method where I just put in the numbers and then I check the middle terms and the outside terms to make sure that it adds up to 7. So I'm gonna start with 1 and 4. So I'm gonna go with x and then 4x. And then for 36 and 7, see, I'm gonna go with 4 and 9. So 4 here, 9 here. And I'm just doing that because I'm kind of trying to think ahead. 4 times 4x is 16x, and x times 9 is 9x. And if I make the 9 negative and the 16 positive, then that would give me my positive 7x in the middle. And I know that one of my numbers has to be negative because 36 is negative. So that means that the 4 has to be plus and the 9 has to be subtracted. So here are our factors, x plus 4 and then 4x minus 9. All right, and then we're going to set each of those equal to 0, and we want the positive solution to the given equation. Well, I can tell that x plus 4 equals 0. That's going to result in a negative solution, so that's not going to be it. But 4x minus 9 equals 0. I'm going to add 9 to both sides and then divide by 4. So we get x equals 9 over 4. That's a positive. That is the positive solution for this equation. All right, number 13. The table summarizes the distribution of color and shape for 100 tiles of equal area. If one of these tiles is selected at random, what is the probability of selecting a red tile? Okay, so we can see that we've got red, blue, and yellow tiles, and then we've got the total over here on the last column, and then the tiles are square or pentagon shaped, and then the total of each of the colors below. So for probability, we always want to know what is the number of successes that are possible out of just the total number of items, including those successes. So how many red tiles do we have? Because that's what our success is. We have 30 red tiles out of 100 total tiles. That's gonna be our fraction. It says to express your answer as a decimal or a fraction. So we do wanna reduce this. We can reduce this down to 3/10. So that is the fraction, or if we wanted to reduce it, or change it into a decimal, then that would be 0.3, 3/10. All right, 14. We've got f of x equals 2x plus 3. For the given function f, the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane. Sorry, the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane is parallel to line J. What is the slope of line J? Okay, this is a pretty simple problem, but it's kind of worded in a complex way, or it's made to sound complex, I guess. So basically what we're saying is that this is one equation that could be graphed on a graph, a coordinate grid, and then there's another, um, line that it's parallel to, line J. So this function is parallel to line J. So all we really need to know is what does it mean for two lines to be parallel to each other? What happens with their slope? With parallel lines, their slope is going to be exactly the same. So, this is already in slope-intercept form. This coefficient of x is going to be our slope, so our slope is 2, for line J because it is going to have the same slope as our equation that we're given. Alright, let's go down to the last page here that we're gonna do for today. We'll pick back up again next week, with the next pages. I'm trying to do 2 from each of these bundles, each week, sorry. Okay, let me just check in real quick. I think we're all good here. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer. Alright, so we've got a proposal for a new library was included on an election ballot. A radio show stated that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal as people who voted against it. A social media post reported that 15,000 more people voted in favor of the proposal than voted against it. Based on these data, how many people voted against the proposal? Okay, so I think this is going to be a system of equations. Let's take a look back through the information that they gave us. So the first piece of information is that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal as people who voted against it. So I'm gonna use F and A for my 2 variables just to keep it simple. So the people that have voted in favor of it are 3 times as many. So if we take the people that voted against it and multiply it times 3, then that will give us the number of people that voted in favor. Okay, so that's one equation. And then we've got a social media post reported that 15,000 more people voted in favor of the proposal. This one might seem a little tricky. 15,000 more people voted in favor. So we're comparing the in favor to against. So what we're doing is the in favor people minus the against people are 15 equals 15,000. That one might be we could have also written it as F equals 15,000 plus A. That would have been another way that we could have written that equation. And I might even go ahead and do that just because we've got, um, that would give me this equation in terms of F, right? So I just added A to both sides of this equation to get this. So now F equals 3A and F equals 15,000 plus A. These 2 expressions are equal to each other. And we do want to know how many people voted against the proposal, so that will help us, um, figure that out. We can just set these equal to each other. Alright, so then we are going to subtract A from both sides, leaving us with 2A equals 15,000. Then A equals 7,500. And yep, here we go. 7,500 is our answer there. Okay, great. Um, down to 16. All right, so looks like we've got maybe parallel lines, transversal. Let's see. In the figure, lines M and N are parallel. These are parallel to each other. If x equals 6k plus the 6k plus 13 and y equals 8k minus 29, what is the value of z? Okay, so we've got x, y, and z here. So one thing that we need to know about parallel lines with transversals is that the two angles across from each other, here and here, are going to be all four of these are going to be congruent to each other, and then the two angles across from each other going the other way, here and here, are all four going to be congruent to each other, and that all of these make linear pairs, right? So all of them are equal to 180. They're supplementary to each other. So z plus this other angle is 180. This other angle plus this one is 180. So all of these, the ones that I have in pink, are supplementary to the ones that I have in the teal color. So that's gonna help us. What we do need is to figure out what k equals so that we can figure out what each of these angles are. So we can see that z is supplementary to both y and x. X equals 6k plus 13, y equals 8k minus 29. So this doesn't directly help us find z yet, but we can figure out what these angles because each of these are equal to each other, so we can just set these two expressions equal to each other and solve for k. All right, so now we're just solving for k. I'm going to subtract 6k from both sides, and I'm going to add 29 to both sides. So that cancels that out here. That cancels that out here. We're left with 2k equals 30, 40, 52. No, 42, sorry. And then k equals 21. Okay. Now notice that 21 is one of the answer choices. They're putting that in there to distract us. 21 does not equal the measurement of this angle, it's what k equals. So we can choose either one of these equations or expressions. It doesn't matter which one, they'll both give us the same answer. But we do need to substitute that in so that we can actually find out what the angle measurement is. So 6 times 21 is 126, 13, and that is 139. Okay, so now we know that both x and y 139 degrees. And that means that these angles are also 139 degrees. And then remember what we said about those linear pairs. Z is supplementary to now we know 139. Now all we need to do is take 180, subtract 139, and then we'll be able to find Z. That is 4. So we're looking at 41 degrees, angle Z. All right, we're doing good. I think we only have 2 more problems. Um, and then we'll wrap it up for the evening. Okay. In the given equation, P is constant. The equation has no solution. What is the value of P? For this one, I would suggest if we have multiple choice answers, I would suggest just substituting in each of these answer choices for P and seeing if it gives us a true equation. Um, yeah. So we'll start with 0. So negative 3x plus 21 times 0, x equals 84. Oops, 84. All right, well, 21 times 0 times x, no matter what x is, that's gonna be 0, so that just gets rid of that term. So we've got negative 3x equals 84, and then we can solve this. So if we divide by negative 3 on both sides, uh, what is that? 84 divided by 3, 28. So x equals negative 28. So that is a solvable equation. So, I don't think it's A. Let's try 1/7. Negative 3x plus 21 times 1/7 x equals 84. So let's figure out what this coefficient would be. So 21, if we make that into a fraction, multiply it 21 over 7, that's gonna reduce down to 3. So negative 3x plus 3x equals 4. So right here, look at what happens to both of our x terms. They're gonna cancel each other out, and negative 3, positive 3, that equals 0. So now we've got 0 equals 84, which is not a true solvable equation. So we already know that um, it is B. But we could try each of these, which I would encourage you to do just for the sake of time. Since we're I don't want this to get too long. I'm gonna skip those 2, just because we already found that that one does not make a true equation. All right, lastly, let's see what we've got with 18 here. Okay, on the chat. Okay. The function, we've got a function up here. The function is defined by the given equation. For what value of x does f of x reach its sorry, minimum? My goodness, can you tell I'm getting tired? It's been a long day. All right, so let's see. This is a quadratic. We know that we can multiply these together and we'll get an x squared equation. Um, with quadratics, you can find the vertex of that parabola, right? So a vertex is going to a parabola is going to either look like this, and it's going to have a minimum, or it's going to look like this, and it's gonna have a maximum. Since they're asking for the minimum, it's probably gonna be this, and we're gonna have a positive x squared term, so it is going to open upward like that. So, the x portion of the vertex can be found by negative b over 2a. Now, we need this in standard form in order to figure out what the b and a are from this, quadratic. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna use the FOIL method, or distributive property, if you will. I like that term better actually than FOIL method, and, expand out this expression. So we've got x times x is x squared, and then we've got x times 13 is 13x. And then we've got negative 10 times x is negative 10x. And then we've got negative 10 times 13 is negative 130. We can combine our like terms here. So f of x equals x squared plus 3x minus 130. Okay, so our b and a are going to be the coefficients. B is gonna be the coefficient of the second term, and A is gonna be a coefficient of the first term. This is an understood 1. Since we don't see anything there, it's an understood 1. So I'm just gonna substitute those in. This is how we find our vertex. Sorry, this is how we find just the x portion of our vertex, which is what this question is asking for. They just want the value of x. So then we've got negative 3 over 2 times 1. So then looks like we're just looking at negative 3 over 2. And that's gonna be answer D. That's the x portion. Now, if we wanted to find the actual vertex, like the coordinate pair for the vertex, then we would take this negative 3 over 2, substitute it back in either into our standard form here or the factored form, and they'll both give you the same answer, and then solve for y, and that would give you the y coordinate, so this part of your vertex point. But we didn't need to do that for that particular problem. Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you like these SAT and PSAT prep sessions. Um, I'm gonna be, like I said, continuing them for another couple of weeks. So, um, I'll see you again next week. Thanks so much for joining.